So, okay, so we got some questions. Yeah, let's start here. Can you talk about the costs of UserTesting.com? How and when does that make sense to use something like that?
Okay, well, I will admit that I am not a huge fan of UserTesting.com's pricing schedules. If you've ever looked into it, it's if you have just a free regular person account, it's like 49 bucks a head, and they limit you to 15 people, basically a year. They aren't super good about checking email addresses though, so you can do that hack with like your name plus something if you're a Gmail address. And
That's not endorsed by us though, right? The
right,
hack.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, don't do that.
Yeah,
No,
don't
you
do
want
that.
to do that. You just create a whole other email address or not, whatever. But that is one way to get around that. I do like the speed that you can get results. And I think that if you are doing like a purely consumer thing, like something like ordering flowers online, something like that everybody does, you'll get good opinions from it. If you're doing something more specific, or even a type of product that is like a cult following product, and you want user feedback, user research that way, you're going to have a lot less luck because it won't be such a conventional thing that everybody shops online for. So those are kind of guardrails with UserTesting.com. As far as the enterprise plan, that is actually like lots of thousands of dollars, and it's kind of like an annual subscription thing. And I think that probably only makes sense for the very biggest companies who have a slush fund. But I do like it for the quick win. I'm willing to pay 50 bucks. I don't have to schedule people because recruiting is expensive and hard in itself. It can take up a lot of hours. We're an hourly billing shop. If I have to spend 10 hours tracking down participants, the client actually kind of spent a big wad of money. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So you talked, another question here. You talked a little bit about Craigslist, but the question is I've heard that people post user research opportunities on Craigslist. Have you tried that? How does it work? Are you a fan? Any of the details you want to add about that?
So this was a great, like, I remember, I'm going to date myself, like 2006, like it was so easy to get people. And even just 3 years ago, it was easy to get people. Like that bariatrics project that I mentioned, my client was in the South and had like a tri-state area. And I was able to post to all these different markets from Pittsburgh, and I wasn't restricted in any way. Of course, at the same time, if you looked at the free jobs and gig and all of that type of posting, they were totally covered with Lyft and Uber, free ads, get paid to drive Lyft, right? So obviously Craigslist realized they had a problem because people who could certainly afford real paid ads were encroaching and basically spamming the classifieds. So they did a lot of stuff, one of which is IP restriction and VPN type stuff. So what I do today is I am kind of limited to me, like unscientifically, based on what I figured out, you basically get one shot to post in a market. And then if you're going to post in any other market, you either need to be in like the same geographic area. So like Dayton can technically kind of post to Dayton and Columbus and nobody's going to be too mad. Mm-hmm. But I can't post Pittsburgh, then walk over and post in Dayton and then go over to Colorado and post. So what I do is I jump on and off VPN, and now I have two. If you go to a Starbucks or whatever, you have a third. If you have coworkers who are also remote, you just give them everything they need to post, and they can then post in their various states. So that's a way you can get reach now. Again, I am a little bit crafty, as you may have gathered by the previous question. So I will go to lengths like this to get people. And you do get responses. They're not the highest quality responses, but like that painting example, I was talking about, I got a couple people off Craigslist, and like, they weren't scary or anything like that.
Yeah.
They
So
were pretty normal.
on that topic real quick, like I know that when we first started doing a lot of this user testing, we came up with some ways to get you a Google Voice number that we could use and do all that. Do you want to talk a little bit about like how you use that? Because I thought that was really interesting when we started that conversation as well.
Yeah, so that's another thing when you're talking to strangers. So user research, until this exact moment, I'll say that like coronavirus has been great for Zoom and for user researchers who like to use Zoom and like to usability test using Zoom, because now this entire population has been trained on that platform, right? But it is a struggle when you're like a person who is used to relying on Zoom, relying on GoToMeeting as your phone number, rather than having your own personal phone number and then, or your own work phone number, and then giving that out to people, right? Like pretty anonymous. The worst thing that can happen is you used your Zoom personal meeting ID instead of setting up a real meeting, and someday some stranger shows up on a call, right? Like we know that's a thing that can happen now. But to get back on subject, I had to get a Google Voice number because at Sparkbox, we don't really have phones. When you're doing user interviews and usability testing, it is super helpful to have somebody's actual phone number and possibly just do it as a meeting that's like, I'm going to call you at 4 p.m. And then you put your phone on, you tell them you're recording, you put it on speaker, you record it via another device, and you go like that. You don't try to get some person who has never had to use this type of technology before on their computer, voice over IP, like it's just a disaster, right? So just get their phone number, dial them directly. You can conference other people in if you want to by adding a line or whatever, but just go that way. And then also when they don't show up, you have their phone number. So you can call them and you know, leave a message with a callback number, text them. They're way easier to track down. Just a regular email address, incredibly difficult to get on somebody's radar.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here's a question, Julie. Is there value in doing surveys instead of having individual conversations?
Okay, like in my ideal world, I want both. So I do like surveys, and I'll mention that Pittsburgh Opera survey that we did. So our research question on that, we have this, so there are so many people in the world who would like opera, was our assumption. If they liked the symphony, if they went to other cultural events, if they were that person, if they listened to certain programs, like we knew that we had this large group of people who just didn't go to the opera for unknown reasons. So we did that survey to find out like what created an opera goer, like what was the pivotal experience that introduced them to opera. And then also for people who had never gone to opera before, like what was their perception of it. So we did have a lot of the standard marketing style survey questions in there, like right down to, we were using this survey for a lot of things, but like right down to if they subscribe to newspapers, what radio station they listen to. Like we had all kinds of, it was a big survey. But we also just had a few open-ended questions that was like, tell us, oh, you went to the opera? Remember back to that first opera. How did it happen? Did you go with a school trip? Did your mom take you? Like, were you on a date? Like, what were you doing? And from that, we kind of were able to get to some of the motivation, right? And we kept hearing a little bit, well, I'll say from that, we got that this like opera, when somebody becomes an opera fan, it's not because they intentionally became an opera fan. It's because they got dragged somewhere. And yeah, basically they got dragged there. They went there. They were like, oh God, this is awesome. After all, like, let me go to another one. Oh, look, it's not at all like I thought. And then from that, so that was a good insight. We did journey mapping and personas and things like that. We knew we wanted to do that. So we knew we had to talk to real people. I had that spare question in there about, hey, can we follow up with you? And we just took all those names, split them up and called them, set up appointments and chatted with them and kind of dug into what they loved about the offer. So surveys do have value, and people do old surveys. There are old surveys you should pick through, definitely, for sure. Not just for email addresses, like I said in the talk, but for things people said earlier that can really help you out.
That's great. Okay, so here's one, and I know this is a conversation you and I have had a whole bunch of times, and one I love hearing you answer is, what and how do you determine how much UX research is enough?
It's kind of like how much your situation can stomach, right? In the most positive way. So when you are entering a project and there's not a strong motivation on the team to have user research done, that's when you try to do as much as you can with the time you have, and you be scrappy, you're small, whatever, and you try to win hearts and minds by showing how awesome that turned out, right? So you just focus on something small and do it really well. And then the other way, if you do have time and money, like you kind of stop doing user research or pause it for a little while, I guess, when you keep hearing the same things, right? Then it's not being valuable anymore. You need new questions or something else to investigate to color things. But if you work in a big organization and you have, well, there are big organizations who have teams of researchers that work on a question and exhaust it, or get close to exhausting it, and then pick up a new question and go on to that. And then maybe they come back to it a while later.
Yeah, awesome. So the same question that I've asked everybody so far, because we stand on the shoulders of giants and we have lots of influences, where do you go to learn about, UX, and who are you reading, and who are the other people that people need to be paying attention to in this space?
Yeah, so like if you're a UX person in general, I like to just be a subscriber. The Nielsen Norman Group's newsletter, it comes every week. They're weirdly, it's like they're reading my emails sometime or my Slack messages, and they send me articles that directly relate. The other thing I like is the books that Rosenfeld Media offers. They're all UX focused for the most part, and design focused. And a lot of books about UX are very beginner, and those are more advanced, deeper dives. So you can really get interested in the subject. Other things in my resource list, I mentioned Observing the User Experience, which is by Mike Kunoveski, if I'm pronouncing his name right. This is actually an old book, like way back in the day. It has a new version. It's a book you buy, and it's often, I think, a book they assign in college. So it has, and it's a pricey book, but buy the first edition used, and it'll be like $10. And that is a great resource. Gives you lots of questions, screeners, examples. It's just a really good resource. And I tend to like books more than, you can always Google something and find good information as long as you're checking who the source is. But I like the permanence of books, because in our industry, I used to get a lot off of Adaptive Paths blog, and now those are all 404s. So
that's kind of sad. Makes me sad when things go away. So, someone else wants to know, do you have any pets, Julie?
of course I have pets. His name is Max. He's been on Twitter today and the roundup of photos, but he is asleep like 5 feet away, or else I would pick him up and show him. He is he's probably 13 now. I got him last year. He is a Westie who had been given up by 2 previous owners for seemingly no good reason, because he is like absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Quick story on that is, there was a time, I think last year, when she lives in Pittsburgh, visited the Dayton office here where I'm at, and decided to leave Max photos of her dog in everyone's family frames around the office. And it took us I think, about 2 weeks to find them all from the time you left.
Yep, just shows how often you look at your family photos.
Yeah, that was the point. Um, so we have a question from Tabra. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. How do you know how to define the scope of user research during the initial stage of a project? How general should you begin?
I really do begin by trying to find out how much market research or research by any other name the client has already done or the organization has already done. Because a lot of times they have done a decent amount of user research and they didn't realize it, right? A lot of times, like if you're at a big company with business analysts have been, doing half of the work of a UX person. Like if you would consider requirements and talking to users and stakeholders a UX person's job, they've been doing that. So defining the scope during the initial stage, like once I get a feeling for how much they know already, I have a rule that's like, I need a user or a survey or us something to make this legitimate. Like, I don't want to go straight into wireframes or design without having talked to anybody first person. I think that isn't a great deal. So even if yeah, basically that's my rule on that. And then if they have that tolerance, if they have the stomach for more, we'll do a lot. If I had a struggle getting that one person, I'm going to try again on the next project with them to do more.
Another question. What do you think of Heatmap tools for analyzing user interactions? We tried Hotjar and found it makes recording of user sessions where we could see them scroll and click. I won't be able to stick around for the answer online, but we'll check recording later. Thanks. So that's the first, I'm going to hang up. I'll listen. Thanks. But
okay. All right. Yes. So I do like Hotjar. I like, so as far as the recordings go, you can record hours and hours and hours. And it does feel to me like after you watch a handful, after you spend a couple hours watching, or maybe even 30 minutes watching, depending on how big your website is, you feel pretty done. You feel like you know what you know, but you don't know why you know what you know now. You might have some good guesses, but for things like that, I really, really, really like unmoderated usability testing when I can, or not unmoderated, moderated usability testing when I can. So I can say, oh, I noticed you hardly scroll, you're on a product detail page and you're not scrolling at all. And we have all this stuff down here. Like, why? What's going on? Like, did we get this so perfectly right that everything was right where you wanted it? So I do like those tools. I do think that I like Google Analytics with scroll depth event tracking a little better than Hotjar. Hotjar is impressive to show to people, but the ability to use all your Google Analytics information and then compare it against your scroll depth as well makes that information way more valuable. And like right now, you can't tell how many people didn't scroll yet put an item in their cart and checked out, right? That's where the valuable thing is. You don't have to sit through screen recordings for that. Oh. You can just look in analytics.
Yeah. All right. So here's one that I've heard you talk about a lot in the past, but how many people do I need to talk to in order to make it worthwhile? This is the statistically significant results versus valuable, that whole conversation.
Yes. So this is where doing a survey can be nice because you're able to see patterns kind of more clearly the more folks maybe left an open-ended survey question. The famous usability fact, statistic, wouldn't call it a fact, is that, when you're usability testing, you start with 5. And I think that it's often similar with talking to people. If you're within an audience and you talk to a solid handful, so let's say 5, as long as you start to see the pattern in what they're saying, like if you talk to 5 people and 5 people tell you entirely different things, you need to talk to the 6th person. Maybe you need to look at your questions or your purpose in life for this project. Like you might need to evaluate things more. But if you talk to people and as you're going, you're seeing consistency, then you know you're on the right track, and you can stop scheduling interviews when you're, because it's not worth it anymore.
Yeah. So when you're looking for doing this recruiting, are you looking for more extreme power users or more typical users, or like where is that balance of like who the right audience is?
Yeah, kind of depends on your outlook on life. Like the design thinking, like the change by design, the IDEO folks might say, you'll get a lot of value from your power users. And you should stick to the extremes, because then you might get a lot of great innovations, right? But maybe if you aren't really so much seeking out innovation as much as you are just trying to make a thing a little bit better, or trying to understand an audience better so that you can start to dream about the things you might make, then you might want more middle of the road, average type folks. I do enjoy the outliers though, because, but let's be honest, not, like same thing with developers. There are like some folks at Sparkbox, well, Slack changed their UI. I'm a big mouse person. Like I use my mouse for lots of things. They moved a bunch of things that I liked, and I was like stumped for a solid 2 weeks. Couldn't get around. It was frustrating. And everybody was like, oh, don't you know, you just Command K and that. And I'm never a person who has memorized the command things, unless it's like copy paste, I don't know it. So like, yeah, basically it would be good if I was doing a tool that you wanted power users for, or you wanted to know where the market should go, then talk to your extremes. Otherwise, stick in the middle.
Thank you. All right. So we have time for one more question. And I saved this one for last because I feel like there's a good answer behind it. So what is the wildest thing you've ever asked your friends or coworkers for while doing user experience type work?
See, I don't get that many wild projects. Yeah, we need more wild clients, Rob, if you want a wild answer. But I would say that, well, so back in the day, I did a lot of like higher ed usability testing. And it was the type of usability testing where and user interviews and discoveries, all of that, where you you showed up in their space with a thing and you did it. And with that was, I remember we asked a friend of a friend was a guidance counselor at a prep school. And then we got like 3 high schoolers that way. Then another time I had to go to a high school and talk to people. And it was so, I won't call that wild, but it was so weird. I had, like I was a grown adult, like trying to usability test these college students or pre-college, I don't know, high schoolers, man, I am not a high schooler. So we went to great lengths to get kids who were under 18 and the permission slips and all of that. And it was just so crazy to be in a high school. And I just prayed that they didn't have a fire drill.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So if you're looking for more, our follow-on kind of thing for this is you've heard Julie's big idea for a shared user research resource. And if you're interested in participating, here's the link for you. This is something new. We're excited to see where it goes. And just see if we can, help each other out. Like that's so much of what the web is becoming a good resource for each other. And if we can, make this recruiting part a little bit easier with some willing participants to do some user research, that sounds great. Julie, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so the trick when you look at the user research form, it will ask if you attended unconference. When you select that, yes, I attended unconference, that's what unlocks the thing where you can say, give me a copy of this list. If you say you didn't attend unconference, you won't get that option. So please fill out the form accurately, and then kind of keep that a little secret to keep the internet out, or the later internet, who knows. But that is how you hack that form, I guess.
Okay. There's been a lot of hacks in this, in your advice. Thank you, Julie,
I
for
know,
joining us
sorry.
and taking the time. And I always love your, like, if you have a product out there that there is blurry lines and edge cases, Julie is the one to find them. She will poke at it until she finds a way to get what she wants. It's always impressive. All right. Thanks, Julie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.